Thank you. Good afternoon. Welcome to our celebration event and to the announcement of the publication, exciting publication of a new study called Return on Environment, How Protected Open Space Contributes to not just the environment, but the economy in Chester County. So let's start with an introduction. I'm Molly Morrison, and I'm thrilled to be here. I'm also thrilled to see so many familiar faces as part of today's celebration. As we begin the program, I would like to start with some very important recognitions of all of the organizations and individuals who have contributed to the event, and especially to the Return on Environment report. It is a very long list, so please hold your applause to the end, and you'll know when I'm finished because I will lead the applause. First, our partners who helped both to fund and develop the Return on Environment report, and those include many of the county's land trusts and conservancies, including Brandywine Conservancy, Brandywine Red Clay Alliance, Branch Hickory Creek Conservation Trust, Natural Lands, the Land Conservancy for Southern Chester County, and the Willistown Conservation Trust. We also have had amazing support from Chester County's agencies and departments, including the Agricultural Development Council, the Department of Open Space Preservation, the Planning Commission, and the Water Resources Authority. Add to all of those the Chester County Economic Development Council, the Chester County Association of Township Officials, the Delaware Valley Regional Planning Commission, eConsult Solutions, Stroud Water Research Center, and very importantly, our Board of Chester County Commissioners. So thank you all. Wanted to recognize our elected officials and their representatives who are with us tonight. State Senator Katie Muth. Katie? Gonna run to another event, okay. State Representative Carolyn Kavita. Carolyn? State Representative Christina Safi. Christina? Here on behalf of Congresswoman Chrissy Houlihan is Noah Levine. And representing State Senator Andy Dinniman is Steve Grabicki. We have had RSVPs from 3 former commissioners. I'm not sure if they're all here right now, but we are either expecting or celebrating the participation of Pat O'Donnell, Colin Hanna, and Karen Martinick. So please stand if you're here. And finally, our sponsors, we thank Dave McGrogan and the team from Harvest Seasonal Grill and Wine Bar for their generous food contribution, and Bill Kovaleski and the Victory Brewing Company for their beer contribution. And now to set the scene, please turn your attention to the screen as we begin a brief video.
Open space makes Chester County one of the most beautiful places in Pennsylvania to live, work, and visit. But the county's open spaces offer more than just pretty views. They are economic powerhouses that generate significant benefits for our region. Open space contributes to our local economies and property values and helps us save on everything from healthcare to recreation. On average, homes in Chester County are valued at over $11,000 more because of proximity to protected open space. When you add it all together, it's a gain of more than $1.6 billion for our county's homeowners and economy. Chester County's open spaces aren't just beautiful, they're hardworking. Our fields and forests help filter our water, clean our air, reduce flooding, slow stormwater, and store carbon. Every day, free of charge. If Chester County's protected lands were lost to development, $97 million a year would need to be spent to do what nature does for free. Chester County's protected open spaces invite exploration and enjoyment. They keep us fit, feeling good, and out of the doctor's office. What's more, recreational activities on Chester County's protected open space account for over $170 million in avoided medical costs every year. Open spaces attract visitors who collectively spend $238 million in Chester County each year. Protected farmland also puts about $135 million back into the economy each year. Together, this economic activity helps create jobs. It's less expensive to preserve land than to develop it. Residential development often costs more because of the demands on infrastructure and new schools. In contrast, farms and open space provide more tax revenue for local governments than they require back in service expenditures. It's a fact. Protected open space is a key factor of Chester County's economic vitality, and it's a part of our cultural identity. Saving Chester County's land saves money.
I am pleased to introduce the Board of Chester County Commissioners, Kichline, Kathi Cozzone, and Terence Farrell, our Board of Commissioners who continue our preservation efforts and who plan, invest, and govern this county so well.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Kichline. I'm the chair of the Board of Commissioners, and I'm going to ask you, how great is it to have a party like this to celebrate the 30th anniversary of Chester County's award-winning open space preservation? I think God likes open space. I saw that weather forecast yesterday. He's holding off until we're done. This is a great celebration, and I can't think of a better place to be than here this evening. I would first like to thank Pennsylvania's DCNR Secretary Cindy Dunn, as well as Molly Morrison. I'd also like to thank Molly Morrison and Peter Hausman for joining us this evening. Your contributions to open space are greatly appreciated. So, turning back the clock a little bit, 30 years ago, on Sunday, April 30th, 1989, the Pottstown Mercury ran a Sunday opinion editorial titled, "Chester County Needs $50 Million Bond Issue to Preserve Farmland." The opinion piece noted that Chester County ranked 8th in the East in the value of its agricultural products, despite the loss of 39% of its farmland between 1950 and 1980. That's an average of 16 acres a day that was being subdivided in the county for residential and commercial development. Chester County Commissioner Irene Brooks became very aware of the explosive growth and development of the county and found that many citizens were taking note as well. Because of this, she took bold action. She proclaimed that it was time for Chester County to stop worrying about the loss of open space and start doing something about it. And that if they didn't take swift action, it would be too late. Now, I know I'm biased, but leave it to a woman to get things done swiftly. Because 6 months later, by November 1989, following the advice of an open space task force, an agreement by Irene's fellow commissioners D.T. Marone and Pat Baldwin, a referendum question relative to open space preservation was placed on the ballot. A resounding 82% of Chester County citizens voted yes to a $50 million bond for open space and environmental preservation. And the rest, as you say, is history. So fast forward to today, 30 years, almost to the day of that opinion article, and here we are with 140,000 acres preserved by the end of 2018. That's more land preserved in Chester County than the size of Philadelphia. And I've talked to some friends that came here from Delaware County, and it's larger than the entire area of Delaware County as well. So, not that we're competitive or anything. And along with that, great news about how that bold move to preserve open space is paying dividends for all of us. The comprehensive return on environment study that details the true economic value of protected open space makes great reading. Chester County's open space offers more than just pretty views. Those pretty views are economic powerhouses that generate significant economic value for our region. And before I turn the microphone over to Kathi, I would like to thank all of the partners who contributed to this project. We are so grateful for your past and present enthusiasm and support, and your dedication to continued preservation in the future. The county couldn't have done it without all of you. I'd like to thank a specific few others, Brian O'Leary and his team at the Planning Commission, for really driving this project and preparing the full return on the environment report. Also, our Brianne Zanin, our recently appointed Director of Open Space Preservation, the one that realized that we're so much better than Maui. We're all the way from Maui. Good move. And I'd like to thank her team as well. Every year, staff in this department visits at least 275 farms, 100 municipal parks, and 100 land trust preserved sites to ensure the protection of the county's investment in open space. I also want to recognize Bill Gladden, Chester County's former Director of Open Space. Bill, your passion to expand and connect the dots of preserved open space has truly helped it make the success that it is today. And finally, Mark Ruxis, the county's recently retired COO and a person who has supported many commissioners, past and present, in all of our initiatives, including open space preservation. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. I am so excited to be here this evening, and I can tell by all of your reaction to the video, to all the folks we've mentioned, how excited you are to be here this evening. This is truly a great day in Chester County to celebrate. On a personal note, I was talking to someone earlier, and I am, when I think about being a commissioner, and we're nearly 30%, almost at our 30% goal, I am so impressed with the folks who way back then had a vision that ended up looking like this. So I want to just thank everyone who was involved from the very beginning. There's a lot of people here who were there from the beginning, so I won't name names because in all likelihood we'll miss someone, and that's not what I want to do. I'm going to just share with you some of the findings of the Return on Environment Study. Thanks to, well, I kind of said all this on my own, so preservation is a big part of the cultural character of Chester County. Our conservancies are respected and strong, historically and in numbers. And our business community truly appreciates the value of open space in locating companies here and attracting employees. Now, with the Return on Environment Report results, we can back up the anecdotal benefits of open space preservation with solid numbers. Numbers like 1.65 billion. Houses located within a half a mile of protected open space are worth $11,000 more on average than those that are not. That adds $1.65 billion to the value of Chester County's housing stock. Taking it one step further, protected open space generates $27.4 million annually in property tax revenues because of the boost in home values. Chester County's open spaces invite exploration and enjoyment. They keep us fit, feeling good, and out of the doctor's office. So here's another number, $172 million. That is the value of medical costs that are avoided every year in Chester County thanks to open spaces. And by serving as free places to exercise, protected open space saves residents $124 million a year in recreational costs. Who needs to join a gym? Oh God, I hope there's no one here from a gym. No gym sponsored this or anything. Who needs to join a gym when you can walk or cycle the Chester Valley, Schuylkill, or Schuylkill River trails? The Return on Environment Report also quantifies the cost of development as compared to the cost of preserving land. Residential developments bring with them increased services like fire and police protection, road maintenance, sewer systems, and new schools. In contrast, farms and other protected open spaces provide more tax revenue for local governments than they need in service spending. So putting it into numbers, again, for every dollar received from farmland and open space taxes, local governments spend 7 cents on services, compared with spending $1.11 on services for every million received from residential development through taxes. So do we all get that? For every $1 million we get from farmland and open space taxes, local governments spend 7 cents, compared with spending $1.11 on services for every dollar received from residential development. I'd say that's a pretty darn good return on investment. When rapid growth began chipping away at Chester County's beautiful green spaces and farmland at a rate of 30,000 acres between 1982 and 1987, it became evident to everyone that something needed to be done to stop it. Chester County was the first in the region to formally set aside funds for a rigorous open space preservation program to blaze a trail that most likely then became preserved in saving land. Over the years, we have become the envy of the state and the nation in how we manage our growth with our preservation. It has even become the basis for our 10-year economic development strategy, Vista 2025. We have always known that preserving land is valuable. Now with this Return on Environment Report, we know the real value. Thank you all for being here. Terence Farrell.
Good evening. 30% in 30 years. That's pretty impressive. I'm Commissioner Terence Farrell, and I too am pleased to be here, and it is wonderful to see so many of you who appreciate the beauty of Chester County's open spaces. Spaces like the ChesLen Preserve that illustrate what is great about our county. It is interesting to note, at least for some, that in 1989, the Board of Commissioners were made up of 2 women and 1 man. I guess the more things change, the more they stay the same. So what we have achieved in 30 years, what have we achieved in 30 years? Nearly 29% of Chester County is preserved. As Michelle said, that's 140,000 acres. And since 1989, we have spent $215 million to preserve open space, which has leveraged a further $424 million thanks to our municipal partners, our conservancy partners, our farmers, and our donors. And there is more to come, because along with our open spaces, we will continue to invest in developing our urban places, which allows the green spaces to remain and even grow. Coming back to the Return on Environment report, let me share a few more details. In addition to being beautiful, Chester County's open places and spaces are hardworking. Our fields and forests help filter our water, clean our air, reduce flooding, slow storm water, and store carbon every day and free of charge. In number terms, protected open space contributes $97 million in annual cost savings and economic gains through environmental services. And if the carbon currently stored in trees or protected open space was released into the air, it would cost $120 million to mitigate the increased emissions. And let's not forget the contribution that Chester County's preserves, farms, trails, parks make to our tourism industry. These are destinations that attract tourists who spend money when they visit. Chester County's agricultural industry, thanks in part to protected farmland, is growing strong through the sale of farm products like feed crops, dairy products, and produce. The ROE report confirms that overall, spending that results from protected open space totals $238 million a year, and saving land contributes an estimated 1,800 jobs to the economy, which generates an additional $69 million in salaries. Real numbers, real values, real return on environment. 30 years of investment has truly resulted in a win-win for Chester County. Former Chester County Commissioner Irene Brooks is now enjoying the open spaces of the West Coast, where she lives. So while she couldn't be with us to celebrate this evening, she did send this message, and I quote, 30 years ago, as a county commissioner, the one constant concern expressed by county residents was rapid growth, the loss of farmland, and the decrease in open space. My question to them was always the same. Are you willing to pay to save open space? Once it's gone forever. Based on the yes answer I heard, I decided to take on the issue. I formed a group of community leaders, along with then courthouse staff Molly Morrison and Wayne Rothamel, to help me develop an open space plan for Chester County. The plan had to be simple. It had to make sense, and we had to know how much it was going to cost. After 6 months, I had a plan to address the concerns. My fellow commissioners were willing to place a non-binding referendum on the ballot to ask the voters what they thought. The referendum asked if voters were willing to support the open space program and if they were willing to bear the annual cost, which would be equivalent to the price, at least then, of a McDonald's family dinner for 4. I added at least then. To help present the referendum to the voters, I formed a citizens group chaired by Peter Hausman, and the SOS, or Save Our Open Space campaign, was born. Bumper stickers, t-shirts, and brochures were created. The campaign attracted people and businesses from all over the county, and both political parties endorsed SOS. Once the campaign was safely on its way, I stepped aside from what would be one of the most successful endeavors the county had ever seen. As a politician, stepping aside was not easy, but I knew in order for the program to last, it had to be citizen-driven. And Irene concludes, more than 80% of those who voted that November voted for the open space plan. After 30 years, I'm grateful to all the commissioners who have supported and enhanced the program, and have made it what it is today. I believe it has endured because we went to the voters first and because it was citizen driven.
Thank you very much, Commissioners. I'm also honored to welcome here this evening the Secretary of the Department of Conservation and Natural Resources, Cindy Adams-Dunn. When Terence mentioned the leverage that Chester County has received for its investment, for every $1 of Chester County funds, another $7 are leveraged as part of the conservation campaign, as part of the conservation deals. And those partners, of course, are essential to the success of the program, and they include municipalities and other funders. But certainly DCNR is one of our primary funders and really an essential element of the success of the program. So thank you for spending time with us this afternoon, Cindy.
Thank you, Molly. I'm really mainly here to congratulate all of you under this big tent. And congratulations, Molly, Peter, commissioners, past commissioners, land trusts, donors, townships, voters, all the people that made this possible. It's truly remarkable what's been accomplished in Chester County over the 30 years. And I'm really pleased and proud DCNR is part of that mosaic. It's interesting, just sitting here thinking about it, without Googling names, without Googling dates, I think the conservation movement in Pennsylvania began right here. Eleanor Windsor on the farm side, Peter Hausman on the natural land side, really built this movement and got it started. And those pioneering days weren't the days where, as Commissioner Farrell mentioned, that you could do a public opinion poll and get support. People saw something happening, but they didn't understand what needed to happen. And I think these pioneers deserve a special thanks, from all of us. I do think DCNR is very pleased and proud to be part of this matrix. I want to recognize our own Drew Gilchrist. Drew is a strong advocate for all of the projects that come in from Chester County, and I'll be speaking in a minute about Drew has to say no to some of the great projects that come in. You generate so many good projects, and the land values are so high that we can't say yes to them all. But we're pleased to be part of that. But I do think that the movement that began here on conservation then generated and supported the state movement for conservation and land conservation in Key 93. And the Key 93 initiative is what generated a guaranteed strand of money for land conservation that allows us to then turn around and support and match your vision and your dollars and be part of your funding package, as Molly had mentioned. So someone should write the book, but I think the conservation movement in Pennsylvania began here, and I think the momentum the state has now was started here. And then we're able to take that momentum across the state and really help other communities realize their vision through the grants program, through the technical assistance program. I'm delighted to get a little snippet of the report. I think it sounds like a wonderful report. I read with interest the one about 5 counties in southeast Pennsylvania that came out maybe 8 years ago or so. Glad to see climate added, glad to see clean water added, and the value of attracting and keeping young people. I think these additional values that we now recognize that open space provides are going to be leading values going forward in a changing climate, with flooding conditions, and with engaging young people in the conservation movement we all know and love so well. So I'm anxious to use it report. I've heard the commissioners, you each speak so eloquently about what's in that report and what it means to your county. Your colleagues across Pennsylvania need to hear this from you. I mean, they need to understand that $7 and the $110 thing. So please spread the word. We don't experience this in every county we work in. We get the citizens to understand the value, and not everyone understands the economics. I do think too, beyond the values of open space and conservation that were recognized here, are intrinsic values that are really just hard to quantify. We're just with a bunch of natural lands folks up and county folks up in Montgomery County earlier today on a Girl Scout camp, talking about women leadership and how time in the outdoors actually leads to leadership skills in women, leadership skills in everybody. So the kind of skills we develop as leaders really evolved from time and nature. I'm not sure it's easy to quantify, but I think people in this room certainly know that it's real. Now sadly, and Drew hates to do this, sadly he says no to good applications from Chester County, and the reason why is we don't have enough money at the state level to meet the vision and needs of Pennsylvania. We get about $8 million a year in the Keystone Fund for land conservation statewide. You know what your property values are here. You put in about $8 or $9 or $10 million of requests from Chester County every year. So if you do the math, you know that he says no to you. You get your share, believe me. I decided not to go into a lot of detail about that. But there's a solution. Governor Wolf has proposed the most optimistic thing I've seen on the table for a long time. Restore Pennsylvania would provide $4.5 billion in infrastructure, including green infrastructure funding across Pennsylvania for a number of purposes. Included, though, are flood remediation, green infrastructure to reduce flooding, land, trail connections, parks, park infrastructure. So you're part of that mix. The Growing Greener Coalition and Land Trust in this room are part of that mix. You'll see it in the form of legislation here soon. So if you're interested, number one, if your legislator supports it, support them in their support. Don't make it hard for them to support it. Support them so they don't get hammered for supporting it, because it does include paying it back through the severance tax. Pennsylvania is the only major gas-producing state in the country that doesn't have a severance tax. It gets paid back over time with the severance tax. So support your legislators, support Restore, and then we'll be able to say yes to more. Drew will be a happier guy. He can say yes to more of your requests. And, we can spread this movement that really had its nexus here in Chester County, spread it across the state, and really be able to say yes to more communities, more vision. And I'm so glad I got to go ahead of Peter Hausman, who was the real creator of this movement in Chester County, along with Alden Windsor. Thank you.
Thank you, Cindy, so much. I just wanted to follow up on your remark about spreading the word across Pennsylvania. I don't know if you know that Commissioner Kathi Cozzone is the new president of the County Commissioners Association of Pennsylvania, CCAP. So she's got the perfect platform for spreading the word. Our final speaker is Peter Hausman, who has already been identified as someone who was very much at the center of both the first, the 12 people who were nominated and appointed by the commissioners back 30 years ago as part of the Citizens Committee, and then the subsequent campaign. And having been on the commissioner's staff at the time, I know that the commissioners were looking for the right people to serve on the Citizens Committee. We had 12 individuals, and it was easy to choose from among those in the county who represented environmental interests, because, as Cindy said, there was a really strong tradition of environmentalism here. The Brandywine Valley Association, the first small watershed association in the country, the Friendship Hickory Creek Trust, Natural Lands Trust, Brandywine Conservancy, many land trust organizations that were active and doing good work. But what we didn't have on the group at the time was someone who could represent the perspective of a developer. And Peter was a commercial developer at the time. He was also a member of the state the Nature Conservancy chapter in Pennsylvania, and was also very involved in the formation of the Willistown Conservation Trust. So he was the perfect sort of left brain, right brain individual to bring all of those perspectives together in one individual, and he has remained a stalwart participant throughout the last 30 years. So please welcome Peter Hausman.
Thank you all. It's wonderful to see so many familiar faces and people that are so passionate about open space. In preparing my remarks, I thought about JFK's comment after the Bay of Pigs fiasco, where he said, "Victory has many claimants and defeat have none." Well, this program is far from a defeat, but many of you here in the room have a very legitimate claim to be part of the success of this thing, and I'm very grateful. And at the risk of missing somebody, I just want to collectively thank you all. Apparently there was a list that went out giving the chronology of the development of all the programs for open space, and my name was misspelled on it, so I didn't get that list. So I'm going to give you my and those of you who have the list, because I'm going to give you my interpretation of what happened, and you can check it against the list and perhaps find out how inaccurate my memory may be. But as Molly and others alluded to, Irene was the initiator of this effort, where we created a commission to want to see if there was a need for open space. And then we came up with a recommendation, and we debated it. Initially it was 10 million, and then it was going to be 25 million, and then we said 50, let's go for it. And I have to put it in the context of the time, because it was an era of read my lips, no new taxes. And we were the first county in the Commonwealth to propose taxing ourselves to protect permanently open space. Nobody knew really whether this was going to work. And the county commissioners who had the power, the then commissioners who had the power to act upon this thing without a referendum, felt we should go out to the voters. And they, at that time, were not willing to endorse it because they wanted the voters to speak. So we created SOS, Chester County Citizens to Save Open Space. We went out, created a committee, we raised money. My recollection is we raised about $300,000 to mount what was a political campaign. And we had envelopes, people were sending us in, it's like Bernie Sanders, people were sending us little small contributions, and it worked. And we flooded the county with t-shirts and bumper stickers and yard signs, and people were volunteering, and yet, we didn't know. This was in an environment, nobody knew whether on election day people would go into the booth and vote for it. And election day came, the turnout was much larger than normal. We were all very nervous. We met that night in the Lincoln Building across from the old courthouse, and as the results came in, clearly it was overwhelming that 82% of the voters supported this thing. And I want to put that in context. I know of no election where an individual ever got 82% of the vote. I mean, in a free election. I mean, Nicolas Maduro and but in a free election. And I looked, and as far as I can determine, the only individual ever in a free election got 82% of the vote was George Washington. And he ran unopposed. The Philadelphia Inquirer at that time was following what we were doing and was kind of describing what we were doing as quaint. They just couldn't believe that this was going on in a county that was growing so quickly. And as was mentioned, that I was in a former life a commercial real estate developer, and I'm sure your initial reaction is, well, that's oxymoronic. How could a guy who is a commercial developer care about open space? And I care deeply, not just for the reasons of the natural resource protection, etc., but because, to me, the wealthy could afford their own open space. The proceeds of this bond issue were going to create municipal parks, county parks, that benefited all the citizens. And in addition, at that time, I guess, I don't want to say I was in the forefront, because I don't know that anybody's ever in the forefront on anything, but I was a firm believer that the economy was so fundamentally changing that open space is infrastructure in a knowledge-based economy. Open space attracts jobs, keeps jobs in a knowledge-based economy. And so it was easy for me to support this thing with great enthusiasm from a business perspective and from a conservation perspective. So after we got this 82% of the vote, we were stunned. I mean, everybody was stunned by the enormous outpouring of support for this thing. And we used that voter support to develop programs that were really instrumental in fundamentally changing the character of growth or pattern of growth in this county. We all know that land use decisions in Pennsylvania are made at the municipal level. But we wanted to use county funds as an incentive for townships to do things that perhaps otherwise they wouldn't do. So the first thing we did open space studies, where we said to the townships, okay, here's your population today, this is what the projection's gonna be, this is where you're gonna be there. What are you gonna do about it? What lands do you wanna protect? What lands do you wanna encourage where development should be? And the match was an incentive that perhaps townships would have done anyway, perhaps they wouldn't have. I mean, I'm looking at Bill Gladden, who's shaking his head there. But it worked, and out of their 73 municipalities in Chester County, unless that's changed, there about 65 of them, I think, initially embraced this open space study. And it changed things, and it encouraged us then to go on from there. It wasn't just the open space, the implementation of the program. In a few years, we developed, and I was on the planning commission then, we developed landscapes, the first landscapes. And we used it as further impetus to create vision partnerships, to create other incentives for townships to plan ahead. We created model ordinances and said, here. We created a point system and say, look, if you want the county to put money for any of your projects or planning, you have to address these following things. And what really stimulated is people realized if there was a point system and they had their municipalities had their own bond issues, they could leverage it further for the benefit of their citizenry. And I believe there are now 35 townships in Chester County that have had their own bond issues that can be matched against the Commonwealth and the state. So the leverage is staggering, and you've heard the results that 30% in 30 years. In the past few days, I have had the opportunity to read Landscapes 3, which was adopted in November, all 176 pages of it. And I don't want to embarrass anybody here and ask how many of you have read 176 pages, but I really recommend it. It is an inspiring document that is addressing the issues that are going to confront us going forward in the future. I was fascinated to read the whys and the hows of what we can do for further resource protection, revitalizing urban centers, housing diversity, and transportation. It is excellent and inspiring. And they were kind enough to say they're building on what we did 30 years ago. I guess that was about 25 years ago. But it is a great doc. It is a great doc. But within that doc, there's a statistic, and the DVRPC has put it out, that Chester County is projected to grow in the next 30 years by 28 to 30%. And statistics are nice, and you go, well, that's nice. But 28 to 30% is 150,000 more people. Okay? I repeat, 150,000 more people. And the housing, shopping, working needs, and transportation needs of those 150,000 people will be satisfied. It's going to put enormous pressure on our remaining natural resources and the challenges to manage growth. In its implementation, I really encourage those that are involved today to be bold. We were bold 30 years ago. We did something that we weren't sure was going to be voter approved, let alone accepted, but we used leverage to get people to act in their own best, what we believe is in our own best interest. And I realize there's always a tension between what the county is trying to get people to do and what the municipalities say their rights are. But the issues that we face, from water protection, traffic, everything, don't stop at a municipal border. I mean, it is the right role for the county to do, to create incentives for us to manage growth and protect resources in the future. And I want to say, Molly didn't mention, but I've been involved in Natural Lands Trust for over 30 years. And there are many people that come from other conservancies here and other you involved in land protection efforts. There is nothing that has been as rewarding for me as it is to protect land. It is the gift that keeps on giving. I know of nothing we can do for our children, grandchildren, and the generations that follow that better than we can do to protect land. And it's better than an art museum. They have to change their exhibits every 4 years, every 3 or 4 months. Ours does it naturally. It is just something I know I feel in the essence of my being, and I know so many of you here feel the same way. So I encourage you, that those of you involved at municipal, county level, and the conservation organizations in Chester County is blessed with such good and outstanding land conservation organizations, to really be creative when we implement this program. One of my favorite quotes, and it's motivated me, is from Dante Inferno, and it's, "The hottest places in hell are reserved for those in time in great need did nothing." We're doing a lot, but I want to make sure we do more. The future of this county, environmentally and economically, depends what we do in the next several years. So thank you so much for coming out.
Thank you, Peter. Just a couple other recognitions before I wrap up. I wanted to acknowledge Bill Schell, who's here representative. He's already left? Just left. Bill Schell, just waiting. Representing State Representative Dan Williams. I want to also personally recognize and thank Patty Elkis of the Delaware Valley Regional Planning Commission. Patty was tremendously influential in the Return on Environment report, both the first one and this one. And finally, Natural Lands for welcoming us to their ChesLen Preserve. I'll keep my wrap-up remarks brief, but I was asked as one of a group of people here who was there at the beginning and continues to serve sort of in the trenches. I have, as some of you know, been fortunate enough to serve not only for Chester County, but at Natural Lands for the last 17 years, and retired at the end of December. But 30 years ago, then as now, Chester County is remarkable. It's physically beautiful, it's historically significant, it's culturally rich. And 30 years ago, the impulse that motivated Irene Brooks and everyone who has supported this effort is to not lose the things that make us remarkable. The farms, the fields, the meadows, the rivers, the streams, the historic buildings, the landscapes, our wonderful towns, our sense of place, and our sense of community. And so we're here today for 3 reasons: to celebrate 30 years of leadership at every level, our commissioners, our elected officials, the state DCNR, and most importantly, those citizens who supported the referendum 30 years ago and are all here today in this room and continue to support the mission of protecting open and green spaces in Chester County. Secondly, we're here to educate and to highlight the extraordinary benefits of protected open space as evidenced by the Return on Environment report. And finally, we're here to rededicate ourselves to the campaign, to not lose that sense of place, to value those things that make Chester County remarkable, to honor them and to keep them close. And let's plan to reconvene here again. Perhaps, let's not wait 30 years, but to celebrate again the continuing protection and preservation of Chester County. Thank you very much for listening.